The car door slammed before I even realized I was still holding the keys. She said no again? Liesel asked, already halfway down the driveway, barefoot. I didn't answer. I just stood there with my hand frozen on the handle, staring at the front porch like something might change if I waited long enough. She tossed a hoodie over her shoulder. No bra. Hair wild from the storm we never got. Well, I'm coming. Get in. I hadn't said a word yet. I hadn't told her where I was going. I hadn't even invited her. But she climbed into the passenger seat like the decision had already been made, like the story had already been written, and we were both just late to the reading. I looked back at the house. The porch light was still on. The blinds hadn't moved. She didn't even care that I left. I'm not going to ask twice, Corbin, Liesel said, voice low. You either drive or you stand there playing statue while she finishes forgetting you exist. That stung. But I turned the key anyway. We drove for 27 minutes without speaking. Country roads. Empty. Just the sound of tires chewing gravel and my heart trying to decide if it was guilt or relief it was feeling. Then she reached into the glove box and pulled out a pack of gum. You always keep the same kind, she said, unwrapping a piece without asking. Yeah, I mumbled. Habit. She hates cinnamon. I know. And you still buy it. Yep. Silence again. Then, quietly, with that same knife-in-honey tone. Do you even remember the last time she looked at you? I wanted to lie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, of course I do. We were just tired. That's all. We're just going through something. But the only thing I could remember was her saying those 4 words like they cost her something. I don't feel like it. And now her sister was in my passenger seat, eating my gum, wearing her hoodie, asking me questions I wasn't ready to answer. And all I could think was, why does this feel more real than anything in the last 6 months? We passed the old railway bridge, the one that always freaked me out as a kid, rusted beams, gaps in the wood, rumors of a ghost train. I hadn't driven this far out in years. Not with her. Not with either of them. Liesel popped another piece of gum, turned the radio knob gently like she owned the car now. You know she only married you because of Dad, right? I gripped the wheel tighter. What? She told me once. After her second glass of wine. Said he liked you because you were safe and reliable. She paused and glanced at me. Those were her exact words. I swallowed hard. My mouth was suddenly dry, and the gum I'd been chewing turned to cardboard. I wanted to say Liesel was wrong, that she misheard, that she twisted the story to hurt me. But the look on her face told me otherwise. She wasn't smirking. She wasn't enjoying this. She looked tired. Honest. Still, I defended my wife. Like a coward. Well, that was years ago, I muttered. Things change. She looked out the window, fingers drumming on her thigh. Yeah, they do. We pulled into a gas station that looked abandoned from the outside, but had one flickering light above the entrance. I stepped out to fill up even though we didn't need it. I just needed a second alone. I didn't even shut the door all the way behind me. But I could hear them. Her voice. Anna's voice. I remembered our wedding night. The way she laughed in the hotel room because I was so nervous I dropped the key card 3 times. That same laugh that used to wrap itself around me like a blanket now wrapped around silence like a knife. I finished filling up and walked back to the driver's side. She was reclined, arms folded, eyes closed. She ever tell you what happened last summer when you were at that work conference? I paused mid-step. No, I said, still standing outside the car. Why? She didn't answer immediately, just opened her eyes, tilted her head toward me, and said, maybe I'll tell you someday. When you're not still trying to protect someone who's already gone. We drove in silence again, but this one felt different. Not heavy, not awkward. It felt like a thread was unraveling, something old, something sewn tight for years. And I didn't know whether I wanted to pull it all the way or tie it back into a knot. Then Liesel did something that cracked me open. She took my phone from the dashboard and said, I want to show you something. Without asking, she opened the gallery, scrolled to a folder I'd never seen. One I didn't make. One that wasn't mine. My heart dropped. It was named April Things. She tapped the screen. Photos. Screenshots. Messages. From my wife. And none of them were to me. I didn't touch the phone at first. I didn't even want to look at it, let alone hold it. Something about the way Liesel stared at the screen, calm, almost resigned, told me this wasn't one of those moments you could back out of. Whatever was in there, I wasn't supposed to see. But here it was, in my car, between gas station receipts and cheap cinnamon gum. She turned the screen toward me, and I finally took it from her. My hands were colder than I expected. I hadn't realized I was shaking. The first photo was of a hotel hallway, one of those boutique places downtown with dim yellow lights and fake antique wallpaper. Room 214. I didn't recognize the place, but I recognized the dress. It was the green one, the one she told me she'd spilled wine on and had to donate. But there it was, clinging to her body in the mirror selfie she'd taken in the hallway, lips parted slightly like she was practicing a look I hadn't seen in years, a look she never gave me anymore. Then the screenshots, one after another, like paper cuts across my chest. Room 214. Same as last time. He's still clueless, LOL. You said she's visiting this week? Perfect. My name wasn't in any of the messages, but I didn't need it to be. I was the ghost in every text, the irrelevant, oblivious man making cinnamon toast while she picked out lingerie I hadn't seen in a decade. And here I was, finding it all out not from her, not from some slip-up, but from her sister. I didn't know how to tell you, Liesl said finally, eyes on the road ahead, even though we weren't moving. I found it by accident. I wasn't snooping. I was trying to use her phone to call an Uber when we were out last month. She left it unlocked. My mouth was dry again. My jaw had locked so tightly I could barely speak. Why didn't you tell her you knew? She looked at me then. Slowly. You think I didn't? I screamed at her, Corbin. I threatened to tell you a dozen times. You know what she said? I didn't respond. She said, go ahead. He won't believe you. He doesn't want to know. The worst part? She was right. Somewhere deep down, I had known. I had felt it in the way she started closing the bathroom door. In the way she answered questions with I don't know when she used to give me paragraphs. In the way she started sleeping in a t-shirt instead of the soft blue pajamas I gave her. Liesl reached into the back seat and pulled out a crumpled hoodie. Not mine, not hers. My wife's. She ran her fingers over the sleeve before tossing it back again like it had burned her. She stopped loving you a long time ago, she said, voice cracking for the first time. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stared at my own phone, which had somehow become a window into a version of my life I hadn't known existed. I wanted to go home. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch the steering wheel, but I couldn't even lift my hands. I sat there, frozen in the driver's seat, surrounded by a truth that didn't ask permission before it moved in and destroyed the furniture. Then, quietly, Liesl said something that I'll never forget. She wasn't even the one who ended it, Corbin. You did. You just didn't realize it. And suddenly, I understood what she meant. But it was already too late. Liesl's words clung to the inside of the car like cigarette smoke. You ended it. And I couldn't breathe without tasting them. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was filled with needles. The kind you don't notice until you try to swallow. I stared at the dash like it might explain something to me. Give me a manual for how to unsee what I just saw. The air was thick with every sentence I never said, every question I never asked. Every night I rolled over and told myself, she's just tired. This is just life now. How do you react when someone tells you your marriage died while you were still celebrating anniversaries? Liesl sat back, pulling her legs up into the seat, arms wrapped around her knees. She looked like a child again, and I hated how familiar that felt. She was always the one hiding under the stairs at family gatherings, sketching in her notebook while everyone else pretended to be perfect. Maybe she had always seen us for what we were, a staged photo in a cracked frame. She didn't even try to delete it. I finally said, my voice hoarse, unfamiliar. If she knew you might have seen it, why would she leave it there? Liesl didn't answer right away. She stared out the windshield, watching the bugs tap against the gas station lights. Then she said, because she wanted someone else to find it. Just not you. That made my stomach drop. She was right. My wife had never been careless. She was calculated, curated, even in the way she arranged throw pillows. Nothing was by accident. She's testing the edge, Liesl continued, seeing how far she can push before it breaks. I ran both hands down my face. And what? She thought I'd be too pathetic to even look up? Silence. Then Liesl said, softly, you're not pathetic. Just loyal in a world that's not built for it anymore. That almost broke me. We sat there for a while, parked under that ugly yellow light, the hum of the nearby highway like a slow pulse behind our thoughts. Cars passed, indifferent. The world kept moving. But mine had stopped 3 screenshots ago. Eventually, I started the engine again. Liesl didn't ask where we were going this time. I didn't know either. I just drove. Roads I hadn't been on in years. Roads that led away from the curated life I had memorized and towards something I couldn't name yet. After maybe 20 minutes, she spoke again. You know what she said about you? Back in February? I gripped the wheel again. She said living with you felt like trying to dance in a room with no music. That hit harder than I thought it would. Maybe because I believed it. I'd become background noise in my own house. Reliable. Predictable. A calendar reminder she couldn't bring herself to delete. And in her mind, I wasn't even worth cheating on. I was just invisible. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Liesel said next. She asked me if I thought you'd ever do something drastic. I asked what she meant, and she said, like leave, or fight back, or sleep with someone else. I laughed. Not because it was funny, it wasn't. It was the kind of laugh that only shows up when everything familiar has burned down and you're standing in the ashes wondering if you left the oven on. And then, without meaning to, without even thinking, I said, is that why you're here? To see if I'd sleep with you? The second I said it, I regretted it. But Liesel didn't flinch. She didn't scream or slap me or call me disgusting. She just looked at me. And what she said next changed everything. No, Corbin. I'm here because I already did. The words detonated in the space between us. I already did. They didn't echo like in movies. They just sat there. Quiet. Heavy. Impossible to pick up without cutting myself. I didn't even blink. My brain refused to connect the dots. What? What does that mean? I asked, though I already knew. Liesel leaned her head back, closing her eyes like she was exhausted. Last year, when you were in Denver for that software expo, she was supposed to come with you, remember? Of course I remembered. I had booked the hotel room with 2 keys. I left space in the suitcase for her stuff. I even bought her stupid mango-scented shampoo, so she wouldn't have to bring it. She said she had a migraine. I muttered. She didn't, Liesel said. Eyes still closed. She just didn't want to go. She had someone else lined up. And you? My voice cracked. What? You came over to keep me company. She opened her eyes, looked at me sideways. No. I came over to take care of my drunk sister, who locked herself in your bedroom and cried for an hour about a man who wasn't you. I didn't remember that part. I didn't want to. And when she passed out, Liesel continued, you and I sat in the kitchen. You poured too much whiskey. I said too much. You said too little. And somewhere between those two things, we kissed. I felt a rush of cold through my entire body. Like my skin knew it before my mind would let me. I don't. I started, but the rest didn't come out. You don't remember? She asked. I didn't respond. Because I did remember. Now, in jagged flashes. Her fingers brushing mine when I passed the bottle. Her laugh, the one my wife used to have. The silence that followed. The part where we didn't speak again for months. I thought it was a mistake, I said finally. It was, she replied. But not for the reasons you think. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was hollow. Like something had finally been scooped out that had been rotting inside us. I wasn't trying to seduce you tonight, Liesel said after a while. I came because I didn't want you to find out from someone else. You were going to. Eventually. And she wouldn't have told you kindly. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to. But I couldn't. Not really. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had started drifting long before the kiss, long before the migraine, long before any of it. I had been surviving in a marriage that hadn't wanted to be survived. And in the process, I'd become this ghost version of myself. You think I'm a coward, I said, not as a question. I think you're scared, she answered. Of being wrong. Of blowing everything up and having nothing left. She wasn't wrong. The car was still running. I hadn't even noticed. We were parked now outside a diner I used to eat at when I was broke and 21. Back when I thought pain was temporary and that love, if it was real, lasted forever. I turned the ignition off. We sat in the dark. And then Liesel whispered, you don't have to fix this, you know. You don't owe her anything. You owe yourself something. But what did I owe myself? Redemption? Revenge? Escape? I didn't know. All I knew was that home didn't feel like home anymore. And the front door I'd walked out of 2 hours ago suddenly felt like the entrance to someone else's house. We sat in that car until the diner closed. I watched the staff stack chairs and sweep crumbs into dusty corners, and all I could think about was how familiar that looked. Cleaning up messes no one else noticed, just to keep things looking okay from the outside. That had been my entire marriage. Liesel eventually leaned over, grabbed my arm, and whispered, don't go back there tonight. But I had to. I don't know why. Maybe it was pride, maybe stupidity, maybe some ancient part of me that thought closure was still a thing I could buy with gas mileage and the smell of cinnamon gum. I didn't even say goodbye to her. I just dropped her off 3 blocks from the house and watched her disappear into the dark, hoodie pulled over her face. The closer I got to the house, the more alien it looked. I had mowed that lawn last Sunday, painted the porch 2 summers ago. But now it just looked like a set. Props, facades, fake light coming from fake windows. I parked on the street. Didn't even pull into the driveway. I don't know why. Maybe it felt like I didn't live there anymore. And maybe I didn't. The porch light was off. I unlocked the door as quietly as I could, like I was the one sneaking in, like I was the secret. The air inside felt cold, almost like the place had been holding its breath the whole time I was gone. She was in the kitchen, barefoot, scrolling through her phone at the counter like nothing was wrong. She didn't look up. "You're late," she said, voice flat. "I wasn't aware there was a curfew," I replied carefully. "You left without saying anything. You said you didn't feel like coming," I reminded her. "And then you didn't ask where I was going. Or with who." She looked up then, briefly, just enough to acknowledge that she had heard the last part. And then she went back to her phone. Silence. She was wearing my old college hoodie, not because she missed me, but because she always stole the comfortable ones when her laundry wasn't done. That used to be cute. Now it just looked like someone else pretending to be in love with my ghost. "I saw the photos," I said. That got her attention. She slowly lowered the phone and placed its screen down on the counter. "What photos?" "April things," I said. And her mouth opened just a little, not in surprise, but in calculation. Like she was rewinding everything she'd done in the last few months to figure out how she'd slipped. "Liesel?" she asked. I nodded. "She's lying," she said automatically. She showed me screenshots. Messages. "You in the mirror wearing the green dress you told me you donated." Her voice didn't change. Not even a decibel. "You really believe her over me? Right now?" I said, my chest tightening. "Yeah, I do." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, arms crossed, staring at me like I was a stranger who had overstayed their welcome. "I made a mistake," she said, finally. "But if you think I'm the only one who's done something wrong, then you haven't been paying attention." I blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" She walked past me, calm as ever, grabbed a glass from the cabinet, and filled it with tap water. "You think I didn't notice the long looks? The late texts? You think I don't know why Liesel's been hanging around here more than usual?" I felt my jaw tighten. Nothing happened. She smirked. "That's what you keep telling yourself." For a moment, I couldn't move. Because it wasn't just the cheating. It was how casual she was about it. Like it was weather. Like it was traffic. Like I should have expected it. "You want me to apologize?" she asked. "To beg? You want me to fake tears so you can feel like you want something?" "No," I said, stepping back. "I want you to feel something." But she didn't. Or maybe she did, just not for me. And that's when I realized something that hit me harder than any confession could have. I wasn't living with my wife anymore. I was renting space inside the version of her that still tolerated me. And that lease had quietly expired months ago. The glass never left her hand. Even as I stood there, confessing that I'd seen the messages, the photos, the time-stamped betrayal. She just kept sipping water like I'd told her I forgot to pick up milk. I think part of me wanted her to crack, to break into a million pieces and realize what she'd done. Or maybe I wanted her to admit she didn't love me anymore, because at least that would be something real. Instead, she said, "So what now, Corbin? You want a divorce?" And it wasn't a threat. It wasn't a question. It was a shrug wrapped in syllables. "Is that what you want?" I asked, my voice sounding thinner than I wanted it to. She tilted her head like she was trying to decide whether I was being sincere or just pathetic. "I don't know," she said eventually. "But it wouldn't surprise me if you did." That was the moment I realized she'd already imagined life without me. Probably more than once. And she hadn't been afraid of it. Maybe she'd even looked forward to it. I sat down at the edge of the kitchen chair, the one with the wobble I never got around to fixing. My hands were still shaking, and for once, I didn't try to hide it. "I never cheated," I said, barely above a whisper. "That's not the same as being faithful," she replied, like it was rehearsed. I looked at her, confused. "What does that even mean?" "You stopped showing up years ago, Corbin. You just didn't notice. You think loyalty is enough? You think just staying counts when everything else is gone?" I stared at her, stunned. "So you decided to punish me by replacing me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the sink and poured the rest of the water out, every drop hitting the basin like punctuation. I didn't cheat to hurt you, she said. I cheated to feel something. Because this house is a museum, and you're a walking memory of a life we never figured out how to grow into. She turned and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. And Liesel? I asked. Was she just collateral damage? She flinched, just slightly. That part wasn't planned. She kissed me. I know. I blinked. You know? She told me, she said. Months ago. I felt like the floor had vanished under me. And you didn't care? I did care, she snapped, voice rising for the first time all night. But what was I supposed to do? We were already broken. That kiss just made it obvious. I stood now, pacing. My chest was tight, my breath shallow. You act like this was inevitable. Like none of it matters. No, she said, eyes narrowing. I act like someone who spent 2 years sleeping next to a ghost and finally realized I could haunt someone else. The room spun. I had no comeback. No retort. I wasn't even angry. I was hollowed out, like she'd taken a scalpel and carved out the part of me that still believed we were worth saving. Then, quietly, she added, you know why I didn't delete those messages? I didn't respond. I wanted you to see them. Eventually. Because I knew you'd never leave unless something forced you to. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a trap. She wanted me to catch her. To finally make the decision she couldn't. I stumbled back a step. Was any of it real? I asked. And for a flicker of a second, I saw it. The truth behind her eyes. The version of her that used to lay on my chest and fall asleep mid-sentence. The version who cried during documentaries and doodled hearts on grocery lists. But it was gone as fast as it came. I don't know, she said. And somehow, that was the cruelest answer of all. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the couch. Not because she asked me to, but because the bedroom felt like trespassing. It smelled like her shampoo and someone else's shadow, and I couldn't be in that space knowing it had belonged to more than just us. At around 4 a.m., I heard the bedroom door creak, but she never came into the living room. She paused for a moment, then went back in. That told me everything I needed to know. The story wasn't unfinished. It just wasn't ours anymore. By morning, I'd packed a duffel bag. Not everything. Just the pieces of me that still felt mine. The watch from my grandfather. The book I never finished. A few t-shirts, and one framed photo from our trip to Asheville. Not because I missed it, but because I wanted to remember what hope used to look like. I left her a note. Not out of guilt or bitterness, but because closure, even when undeserved, is still a kindness. It said, I loved you, even when you didn't notice. Even when I disappeared inside this house, this version of us. I'm not angry. I'm just tired of holding my breath. If there's a version of me out there who still gets to dance in a room with music, I'm going to go find him. Don't follow. Just let it end. And I left. I drove aimlessly for 3 hours before stopping at a lake I hadn't visited since high school. It was mostly empty. A few ducks, a jogger, someone playing soft jazz from their phone too loudly. But it felt honest. I sat on a bench and let the sunlight hit my face like it was trying to wake up every part of me that had been numb for too long. And then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. A message from Liesel. I'm not saying I'm proud of how this all unfolded. But if you ever want to talk, really talk, you know where to find me. No lies. No hiding. Just two people being honest, maybe for the first time. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I realized I didn't need to say anything yet. For once, I wasn't rushing to fix someone, prove myself, or clean up a mess that wasn't mine. I put the phone down. And for the first time in years, I breathed without guilt. I didn't lose everything. I lost what wasn't real. And I found what was left of me.